This is Garden Variety, a horticulture podcast from Iowa Public Radio and Iowa State University Extension and Outreach. I'm Charity Nebbe. When plants start growing and insects start buzzing, plant diseases aren't far behind. There is no way to protect your garden from everything that can go wrong, but there are things you can do to prevent some common diseases. Chelsea Harbach is plant disease diagnostician at the Plant and Insect Diagnostic Clinic at Iowa State University, and she is here today to talk disease prevention. Hello, Chelsea.
Good morning, Charity.
Great to have you here. And last fall, we talked disease prevention, and you told us all to clean up our vegetable gardens in particular. Let's say we didn't. Let's start there. What do we need to do right now if we didn't get things cleaned up last fall?
Well, I know with the nicer weather, people are pretty antsy to get going in the garden. And I highly encourage anybody who is antsy but maybe didn't have the chance to clean up their garden last fall, to take a moment and remember the importance of cleaning up your garden before you put anything in there this spring, especially for disease prevention. For many of the plant diseases that occur in the garden, the inoculum that causes disease can survive in the residue from plants that, if we leave it on the surface of the garden, it is there. And so a really, really, really important step in preventing disease is getting rid of that residue. So pump the brakes if you didn't clean up your garden last fall and you're ready to get stuff in the ground now. Pump the brakes and clean up before you put anything in there.
All right. And that also brings up an important conversation to be had about crop rotation. Even if you have a small garden, you need to think about where you're planting things based on where things were last year, right?
Oh my gosh, crop rotation is so important as well. Most pathogens causing disease in our vegetable garden are pretty specific to at least the genus, most times the species of plant that or vegetable that we're planting, and even sometimes like cultivar level. And so rotating the species, hopefully at least, maybe cultivar, if that's all you can do, that will go a long way to essentially make it a little, or I guess it will slow the opportunity for these pathogens to get onto the plants that they can actually cause disease on, because the plant's not immediately accessible. It's moved a little bit, so it's going to take a little bit more work. It'll give you a little bit more time to make sure that your plants are safeguarded.
So we shouldn't plant things where they were last year. Do we need to think about the year before that as well?
I would say if you can, sure. Ideally, I would say like a 3-year crop rotation is great, but in gardens, I know that can be tricky and unfeasible. I would say at least a 1-year rotation is fantastic. But if you're cleaning up the residue at the end of the year, the importance, it's not that crop rotation isn't important, but it's what we call integrated pest management. It's an integrated approach, having multiple layers of work to have these to prevent disease. The more you can do, the more resilient your plants are going to be. So yeah.
All right, so we want to get rid of all of the residue from the previous year's garden. We want to move our crops around and plan to plant in different places. There are other pieces of hardware that we use every year, trellises, tomato cages. What do we need to think about before we plant those back in the garden?
Yeah, those definitely need to be wiped down. I would, get all of the plant residue off of any of the tools that you're using again this year, and give them a good wipe down, hose them down. If you have the capacity, maybe like spray them down with a 10% bleach solution. That will help if there's any spores, because some of these spores can survive, just like on materials. Not necessarily, they don't necessarily need plant materials to survive. So getting those clean, and yeah, like I said, just you don't have to like take a like scrub brush and soap. I would say if you have a spray bottle and can make a 10% bleach solution, so 1 part household bleach, 9 parts just water, tap water, and just spray them down, that would be great.
All right. How about if you do container gardening? So you may, grow tomatoes in a 5-gallon bucket or something like that. You definitely want to swap out the soil in that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you need to also think about that bucket as hardware? Is that something else to wipe down?
I don't think so. When we're thinking about our pots, like for tomatoes, what comes into contact with the pots are the roots. If you didn't have any root diseases, which is probably pretty unlikely if you're using potting media and container gardening, you don't really need to worry about doing a serious clean job on those containers.
Okay. Now, I think we've covered all of the prep part of that, and then we get into the growing season. Now, the diseases tend to show up a little bit later. What can we think about when we're planting to prevent them from coming?
Well, always being diligent, tending to your garden, not only when you are weeding or, harvesting fruit or vegetables. Keeping a close eye on things throughout the season will help give you an eye for when things start to go wrong, because the key for disease mitigation, if and when disease does show up, is catching it quickly. And one of the things that you can think about when you think about trying to keep an eye out for diseases this year is to think about the history. If you have any history of diseases on certain plants in your garden, that will give you kind of a head start for what to look for, because you've seen some of these diseases before. So you can be kind of like keyed in to what you're looking for, and hopefully, you got the disease accurately identified. Of course, sometimes, there are abiotic stressors that can cause symptoms similar to diseases. And that's why it's important to make sure that you get the plant health problem accurately identified, to make sure that, whether or not intervention and what kind of intervention is going to help mitigate the problem.
I think we don't expect our plants to look perfect. What are some of the things that we do see that we should take seriously instead of thinking, okay, that's fine?
Well, in the garden, I think a lot of times some of the more serious problems that show up tend to be ones that there's not a whole lot that we can do as far as mitigation. Things that we're used to seeing in the garden, like on tomatoes, like septoria leaf spot is common, and so is early blight. These are like fungal diseases that generally start at the bottom of the plant on the leaves and work their way up. One of the, of course, sorry, about those though, like one of the ways that you can prevent the progression of those is your watering practices. But there are plenty of diseases that can show up, and there's little to nothing that can be done once you see them. So like our wilt pathogens, our wilt diseases, once plants start to like turn yellow, maybe yellow on one side, or like just start to get like droopy, there's not much we can do about that, but it can still be important to confirm whether or not there's a pathogen involved in that wilt, because that will inform your management or prevention for subsequent years. And then, of course, sometimes we have viruses come in, and a lot of the viruses that we deal with in our garden are moved around by insects. So having some sort of like trap crop or something to like attract the insects there instead of into your garden plants can be helpful in limiting the potential impact of such pathogens.
Now, if you do know the history of diseases in your garden, and there are some of those common diseases that if you've gardened a long time, of course, you're going to recognize. But some of us are not very good at that. And of course, Chelsea, that is where you come in as a plant disease diagnostician. But
Yes.
even before we may reach out to you, do you have a favorite resource that maybe people can get familiar with some of these diseases and do a better job identifying them on their own?
I'm glad you asked because Aaron Stile and I actually worked pretty hard on updating our tomato problems. I don't know if it's a care and how to or something on our Yard and Garden website that includes pictures and descriptions, and that's a really good place to start if you start to see problems specifically on your tomatoes. It's a pretty extensive list of things that can go wrong with tomatoes that might give you a head start to figure out what is going on with your tomatoes.
All right, with some pictures that we can see and think, oh, yeah, that's what that looks like. And then if that doesn't work, that's when we get in touch with you, right?
Yeah. And one of the things that, we do in the diagnostic clinic with every sample we get when, I'm assessing not only the sample tissue that comes in, also all of the information that's provided by the client. Hopefully there's some pictures to go along with it as well. And I will look and try to figure out what's going wrong and tell you how to manage it in the future.
Chelsea Harbach, plant disease diagnostician at the Iowa State University Plant and Insect Diagnostic Clinic. For more gardening information and tips, please subscribe to our Garden Variety newsletter. Find out more at iowapublicradio.org/garden. I'm Charity Nebbe. Garden Variety is a production of Iowa Public Radio and Iowa State University Extension. It's produced by me, Aaron Stile, Caitlin Troutman, and the Iowa Public Radio talk show team. For more garden goodness, please subscribe to our Garden Variety newsletter. Just go to iowapublicradio.org/garden. I'm Charity Nebbe. See you next time.